Strength begins in the invisible space of your mind long before it ever shows up in your actions, decisions, or the way you carry yourself through difficult moments. The mind is the birthplace of every feeling you experience, every belief you hold, and every outcome you ultimately live. When you understand that your mind is the source of your strength, you stop trying to fix the outside world and begin shaping the inner world that creates everything else. Most people collapse under pressure not because their problems are too big, but because their thinking has become too small. They allow fear to dictate their imagination. They allow uncertainty to dominate their focus, and they allow temporary circumstances to define permanent beliefs. The moment you recognize the power of your mind, you reclaim control over your life in a way that changes everything. Because once the mind is strengthened, no situation can weaken you in the same way again. Your thoughts are not random. They are architects building the foundation of your emotional life. Every strong person you admire, every confident decision maker, every resilient individual who has endured storms others could not survive. They all operate from an inner conviction that begins in thought. When you think weak, you feel weak. And when you feel weak, you act weak. But when you think strong, you ignite a force inside you that begins shaping the world according to your decisions instead of your fears. The human mind has the power to turn a simple worry into a mountain or a simple idea into a breakthrough. The question is, which direction are you using it in? Many people have trained their minds to expect failure, to anticipate disappointment, to assume the worst even before it happens. And because the mind creates experience, their life reflects those expectations. Strength comes when you reverse that pattern and begin using your thoughts as commands that shape reality instead of reactions that surrender to it. There is a silent conversation happening inside you every minute of every day. That conversation determines whether you rise or fall. When a challenge shows up, your mind immediately begins to interpret it, and that interpretation becomes the emotional lens you see everything through. If you label the situation as overwhelming, you feel overwhelmed. If you label it as an opportunity to grow, you feel empowered. Nothing in life has meaning until your mind gives it meaning, and your strength is directly connected to the meanings you choose. The same circumstance can build one person and break another, not because the challenge is different, but because the interpretation is different. As you expand your awareness, you begin to understand that you don't respond to events. You respond to your thoughts about those events. And once you gain the ability to control those thoughts, you gain the ability to control your emotional state in any situation. Your mind is also shaped by the images you hold within it. Visualization is not a motivational concept. It is a psychological mechanism. The more clearly you see strength, confidence, and stability in your imagination, the more naturally you express it in your behavior. The mind cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one, which means every picture you replay in your imagination becomes a rehearsal for who you are becoming. If you constantly replay images of failure, rejection, and fear, your mind records those pictures as instructions. But if you consistently imagine yourself responding with clarity, overcoming challenges, and standing firm under pressure, your mind begins constructing those abilities within you. Strength is built in those quiet moments when you close your eyes and choose to see yourself as capable, powerful, and in control, even when life feels chaotic on the outside. Another essential part of mental strength is the awareness of what you allow to enter your mind. Thoughts are often shaped by what you consume, conversations, information, environments, and even the silent beliefs you've inherited from past experiences. When you allow negativity, doubt, and fear-based voices to dominate your mind, your strength weakens. But when you deliberately feed your mind with truth, wisdom, clarity, and possibility, your inner strength expands. Your mind responds to whatever you expose it to. And if you want to stay strong in any situation, you must become the guardian of your mental space. You must choose what you allow in. You must decide what you will believe. You must take responsibility for the ideas you nurture and the ones you reject. Mental strength is not built by accident. It is built by intention. Throughout life, situations will come that challenge your peace, your patience, your identity, and your belief in your own potential. You cannot control what arrives at your door, but you can control the thoughts you entertain when it arrives. When your mind is strong, you can walk through situations that would have destroyed you in the past. Not because they are easier now, but because you are wiser, more aware, and more anchored in your internal power. Strength becomes a natural expression of a mind that has been trained to think with clarity, instead of confusion, with purpose instead of panic, and with conviction instead of fear. And as you continue to shape your thoughts, you continue to shape yourself until the person you become is stronger than any situation you could ever face. Strength grows the moment you learn to shift your focus from what's wrong to what's possible, because the direction of your attention determines the direction of your life. Most people stay trapped in weakness, not because their situation is impossible, but because their eyes are locked on the problem instead of the path. When all your energy is spent staring at what's broken, what's missing, or what's painful, you magnify those things until they feel larger than your ability to overcome them. The mind works like a magnifying glass. Whatever you place under it becomes bigger, louder, and heavier. A problem that is given all your attention gains power over your emotions, your decisions, and your confidence. But the moment you redirect your focus toward the possibilities that exist within the same situation, your energy begins to rise, your creativity activates, and your strength starts to rebuild from the inside out. Every situation, no matter how difficult, carries both a challenge and an opportunity. Weakness is born when you feed the challenge. Strength is born when you feed the possibility. When you keep replaying thoughts about how unfair, how hard, or how impossible something feels, you create a mindset that invites discouragement. But when you ask yourself questions that open your mind, what can I learn here? What can I become through this? What new path is hidden in this? You shift from being a victim of your circumstances to becoming the creator of your response. Redirecting your focus doesn't mean ignoring problems. It means choosing not to surrender your power to them. It means deciding that while you acknowledge the difficulty, you refuse to let it define what you believe is still possible for you. Every strong person has mastered the ability to control their focus in moments when most people lose theirs. They understand that fear grows when you stare at it, stress grows when you dwell on it, and doubt grows when you keep giving it mental space. But possibility grows the moment you give it your attention. Your emotional state follows your focus. If you focus on what you cannot control, you feel powerless. If you focus on the worst outcome, you feel anxious. If you focus on the present moment and what you can do right now, you feel grounded. And if you focus on the possibility of growth, change, and new beginnings, you feel stronger and more capable. Strength is not about pretending everything is fine. It's about shifting your attention toward the parts of the situation that empower you rather than weaken you. Your focus also determines your behavior. When you focus only on the problem, you freeze, you hesitate, you overthink, you convince yourself that nothing can change. But when you focus on the possibility of progress, even the smallest progress, you begin to move. You start taking steps, exploring solutions, seeking guidance, and trying again. Movement creates momentum, and momentum creates strength. What once felt overwhelming begins to feel manageable simply because you change what you chose to see. The human mind is naturally drawn to what it repeats, so the more you rehearse possibility in your thoughts, the more naturally your actions begin to align with it. You begin behaving like someone who believes something good can still come out of the moment, and that belief becomes the fuel that strengthens you from within. Another powerful part of shifting focus is learning to separate what is happening from what you imagine will happen. Many people weaken themselves by creating mental stories of disaster, failure, or loss that have not even occurred. Instead of facing the situation itself, they face the exaggerated version created in their mind. This drains strength faster than the challenge itself. When you consciously redirect your focus away from imagined fears and toward the actual facts of the moment, you regain clarity. You realize that most situations are not as impossible as your worries make them appear. You notice resources you couldn't see before. You recognize options you overlooked. You calm your emotions enough to think rationally. Strength begins to rise not because the situation changed, but because the lens you're looking through changed. Shifting focus also requires the discipline to choose what you give your mental space to daily. If you repeatedly focus on negativity, comparison, regret, or doubt, you weaken yourself even before a challenge arrives. But if you condition your mind to focus on gratitude, growth, and possibilities long before difficulties appear, you build strength that becomes available when you need it most. When life hits hard, your mind will fall back on its strongest patterns. If your pattern is to focus on the worst, you collapse. If your pattern is to look for possibilities, you rise. Strength is a habit long before it is a reaction. It is built through thousands of moments where you choose to direct your attention toward what empowers you instead of what drains you. As you begin training your focus, you learn that possibilities are always present, even in situations that look completely closed. Sometimes the possibility is a new direction. Sometimes it is a new version of yourself. Sometimes it is a lesson that elevates you. Sometimes it is a strength you never realized you had, but it is always there. The key is teaching your mind to look for it, instead of feeding the thoughts that weaken your spirit. The more consistently you practice shifting your focus to what is possible, the stronger you become, and the more naturally you navigate situations that once felt impossible for you. Strength becomes unshakable when you know exactly who you are, what you value, and what you stand for, because identity is the most powerful foundation a human being can possess. People collapse under pressure, not because the situation is too strong, but because their sense of self is too weak or undefined. When you don't know who you are, every opinion can sway you, every challenge can intimidate you, and every setback can make you question your own worth. But when your identity is rooted in clarity and certainty, you become steady in moments that would overwhelm others. You carry yourself with a sense of internal stability that cannot be taken away by circumstance, because your strength is built on something deeper than the situation you are facing. Identity is not about titles, achievements, or roles. Those things can be taken from you, changed by life, or reshaped by time. True identity is the internal truth you hold about yourself, the beliefs you carry, the values you refuse to compromise, the purpose that drives your decisions, and the standards you expect from yourself. When these are clear, you move through life with a natural strength because you are not operating from confusion. A confused person becomes fragile under pressure. A clear person becomes strong, grounded, and intentional. When you know who you are, you stop living in reaction to the world and begin living in alignment with your inner truth. Pressure tests identity. It exposes the gaps. It reveals whether you truly believe what you say you believe. Many people appear strong when life is comfortable, but when difficulties appear, their identity crumbles because it was built on external validation or temporary circumstances. But a person who is rooted in who they are carries a strength that transcends the situation. They don't allow fear to define them because they know they are bigger than the moment. They don't allow doubt to interrupt their direction because they know their purpose is not negotiable. They don't allow the world's noise to drown out their clarity because they trust the inner voice that guides them. Identity also shapes your emotional responses. When you have a weak sense of self, you take everything personally. You become easily hurt, easily offended, easily discouraged. Every small challenge feels like a threat to your worth. But when you have a strong identity, you begin to see situations for what they are, not for what your insecurities make them appear to be. You become less reactive and more intentional. You make choices based on your values, not your fears. You approach challenges with a mindset of strength because you no longer base your confidence on how good life feels, but on who you are at your core. Strength flows naturally from identity because identity anchors you when emotions try to sway you. Another powerful aspect of identity is knowing what you will not tolerate in your life. When you are unsure of yourself, you accept anything, mistreatment, disrespect, poor habits, negative voices, or environments that drain your potential. But when you're clear about who you are, your standards rise. You draw boundaries not from arrogance, but from self-respect. You walk away from situations that shrink you. You stay away from people who disturb your peace. You say no to anything that moves you away from your purpose. Strength grows when your identity becomes the filter that decides what you allow into your life and what you refuse to entertain. Identity also determines the decisions you make. Every choice is a reflection of the person you believe yourself to be. A person with a weak identity makes choices based on fear, comfort, or momentary emotion. They shrink themselves to fit situations. They hesitate when opportunities appear. They doubt their abilities because they don't see themselves as capable. But a person with a strong identity chooses from a place of certainty. They believe in their ability to adapt, grow, and overcome. They make decisions aligned with the future they want, not the fears they feel in the moment. This alignment between identity and action creates a powerful form of strength that becomes evident in every area of life. Identity also determines your resilience. When setbacks come, a person without a strong sense of self sees failure as a reflection of who they are. They internalize the disappointment and assume it means they are not capable. But a person with a strong identity sees setbacks as temporary experiences that do not change their worth or their potential. They rise faster because failure does not shake their sense of self. They continue because they know who they are, even when life tests them. Resilience comes from identity because your ability to stand again depends on the belief you hold about yourself. As life challenges you, the most powerful thing you can do is return to the truth of who you are and reaffirm it. When you know your identity deeply, your principles, your values, your purpose, and your boundaries, you carry a strength that is not dependent on circumstances but flows from within you. The more solid your identity becomes, the less situations can move you, and the more naturally strength becomes your daily posture rather than something you search for only when life becomes difficult. Your environment plays a powerful role in shaping your emotional strength, often far more than people realize. Human beings absorb energy, attitudes, and beliefs from the spaces and people around them, even when they think they are unaffected. You can have all the potential in the world, but if you surround yourself with voices that weaken you, environment that drain you, and influences that feed your doubts, your inner strength slowly erodes without you even noticing. Strength is not only something you build within yourself, it is something you protect by being intentional about what you allow your mind and heart to stay connected to. When you understand that your environment is constantly shaping your thoughts, your mood, your self-image, and your belief in what is possible, you begin to guard your space with the same seriousness you guard your dreams. People underestimate how much they are influenced by what they repeatedly hear. The words spoken around you become the thoughts you think when you're alone. If you spend time with people who complain, fear the future, question your dreams, or speak from a place of limitation, their mindset begins to seep into your own thinking. You start doubting your path. You shrink your goals. You lower your expectations to match the environment instead of elevating them to match your potential. Strength weakens when you are surrounded by those who reinforce your insecurities rather than your capabilities. But when you choose an environment where people speak life, possibility, encouragement, and belief, something inside you rises. Your strength expands because the atmosphere around you supports your inner power instead of suppressing it. Environment also includes the digital voices you consume. Most people spend hours scrolling through content without realizing that every message is shaping their emotional foundation. Negative news, toxic arguments, unrealistic comparisons, and fear-driven content all slowly weaken your resilience. They build anxiety, feed self-doubt, and cloud your focus. What you consume becomes what you believe, and what you believe becomes how you behave. Strength grows when you deliberately choose to feed your mind with things that uplift, educate, empower, and expand your vision. You become emotionally stronger when you replace noise with wisdom, chaos with clarity, and distraction with purpose. The environment you build online is just as important as the one you create offline, because both influence your inner state. The people closest to you often determine your mental climate. You cannot stay strong around those who constantly drain your emotional energy. Energy is contagious, and if you're not careful, you begin carrying burdens that are not yours. Some people live in permanent negativity, and if you stay too close, you inherit the heaviness. Others operate from fear, and if you listen long enough, their fear becomes your fear. But there are people who carry strength within them. People who think boldly, speak courageously, and live intentionally. These are the people who make you feel stronger just by being around them. They challenge you to grow, remind you of your potential, and elevate your mindset. Your strength multiplies when your environment aligns with your vision rather than pulling you away from it. Your physical environment also influences your emotional strength. A cluttered space often leads to a cluttered mind. A chaotic environment creates tension, distraction, and a sense of overwhelm. But you create a space that supports calmness, order, focus, and inspiration. Your inner strength naturally increases. The physical space you live in can either anchor you or drain you. It can make you feel grounded or leave you feeling scattered. Being intentional about your environment means designing spaces that reflect the life you want, not the stress you're trying to escape. Small changes in your surroundings can create significant changes in your emotional stability. Environment also shapes your habits. When you are surrounded by people who procrastinate, you lose your urgency. When you are around people who avoid growth, You avoid challenges. When you are connected to those who settle for less, you begin settling without realizing it. But when your environment is filled with individuals who push themselves, prioritize discipline, and pursue growth, you naturally start rising to their level. Strength is often a reflection of the habits you practice daily, and habits are heavily influenced by the environment that supports or discourages them. If you want stronger habits, you need a stronger environment. Choosing your environment also means choosing your emotional boundaries. You have the right to protect your peace, limit access, and distance yourself from anything that disrupts your mental clarity. You are not obligated to stay connected to people or places that weaken your spirit. Strength grows every time you choose an environment that aligns with your growth rather than one that keeps you stuck. The more intentional you become about the influences surrounding you, the more naturally your inner strength rises. Because you are no longer fighting against an environment that works against you, but standing in one that supports who you are becoming. Strength is not loud, impulsive, or explosive. Real strength is the ability to remain calm, clear, and intentional when everything around you is trying to pull you into chaos. Most people react to life out of emotion, habit, or fear. They hear something they don't like and immediately respond with anger. They face an unexpected situation and instantly panic. They receive bad news and collapse mentally before understanding the full picture. Reaction is automatic. It bypasses thought and flows straight from emotion. But responding is different. Responding requires awareness. It requires a pause. It requires the maturity to step back from the heat of the moment and choose the meaning you give to the situation. Responding is strength because it allows you to stay in control even when the situation is trying to control you. When you react, you give your power away. You allow the situation to dictate how you feel and how you behave. You allow the emotions of the moment to override your clarity. You make decisions from a place of panic, frustration, or confusion, and those decisions often create even more problems. But when you respond, you reclaim your power. You acknowledge the emotion, but you do not become the emotion. You recognize the challenge, but you don't let the challenge dictate your identity. You choose your next step from a place of intention, not from a place of impulse. Responding allows you to maintain your composure. And composure is the foundation of strength in difficult situations. One of the greatest skills you can develop is the ability to pause before you act. The pause is where strength grows. The pause is where clarity forms. The pause is where emotions settle and perspective returns. Most people fear the pause because they mistake stillness for weakness. But the pause is actually the moment where you regain control over your thinking. The pause allows you to ask yourself important questions. What is really going on here? What am I feeling? And why? Is this worth my energy? What outcome do I want? What response aligns with who I am becoming? These questions shift you from emotional reaction to intentional response. And that shift is what creates strength under pressure. Responding instead of reacting also protects your relationships. Many conflicts escalate because someone reacted without thinking. Words spoken in anger cannot be undone. Actions taken out of frustration often lead to regret. But when you choose to respond with mindfulness, you communicate from a place of understanding rather than accusation. You create space for dialogue instead of confrontation. You strengthen trust rather than damaging it. Strength is not about dominating others. It is about controlling yourself. And the person who controls their emotions has far more power than the person who tries to control the situation through force. Another aspect of responding is emotional regulation. Emotional strength does not mean you don't feel fear, anger, sadness, or frustration. It means you don't allow those emotions to drive your behavior. You observe your emotions without letting them take over. You acknowledge them without letting them shape your decisions. When you learn to regulate your emotions, your responses become more aligned with your values rather than your impulses. You begin to act like the person you aspire to be, even when your emotions push you in a different direction. This self-regulation becomes a defining quality of strength because it shows that your inner world is not at the mercy of external chaos. Responding also gives you the ability to think long-term instead of getting stuck in the intensity of the moment. Reaction is short-sighted. It only sees the immediate feeling. It only cares about instant relief or expression. But responding is thoughtful. It considers the consequences. It thinks about the future. It aligns actions with long-term goals. This long-term awareness allows you to handle situations with wisdom rather than emotion, because you are not just thinking about how you feel right now. You are thinking about who you want to become and what kind of life you want to build. Strength flourishes when your present actions reflect your future vision instead of your temporary emotions. Another powerful part of responding is understanding that silence can be stronger than words. Sometimes strength is walking away instead of arguing. Sometimes strength is staying quiet instead of proving a point. Sometimes strength is allowing time to reveal truth instead of trying to force it. Silence is not weakness. It is choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and control over reaction. Silence often reveals the deeper truth of a situation because when you aren't reacting, you can see things others miss. You can identify intentions, patterns, and motives that would have stayed hidden if you reacted too quickly. Responding instead of reacting also trains your mind to operate from a higher level of awareness. You stop living through the lens of your triggers and start living from the lens of your values. You stop being controlled by external situations and start becoming guided by internal strength. You begin to see challenges as opportunities to practice clarity, patience, and self-control. Every time you choose to respond instead of react, you strengthen your inner foundation. You show yourself that you can handle pressure without collapsing, that you can face difficulty without losing yourself, and that you can navigate chaos with calmness and intention. Strength becomes lasting when you understand that no situation is permanent, no emotion is final, and no season of life exists without movement. Everything in life is always shifting. Your circumstances, your relationships, your challenges, your opportunities, even the version of yourself that you are today, nothing stays the same. And that truth alone becomes a source of strength when you truly embrace it. People weaken themselves when they believe that a difficult season will last forever. They convince themselves that the pain, the confusion, the pressure, or the uncertainty they are experiencing is permanent. This belief drains their hope, their motivation, and their ability to see solutions. But when you know with absolute certainty that every situation is temporary, you begin to face life with a strength that cannot be defeated. Understanding the temporary nature of life gives you the emotional space to breathe. You stop treating every setback like a permanent identity. You stop treating every challenge like a dead end. You stop treating every loss like the end of your story. Instead, you recognize that you are moving through a moment, not defining yourself by it. This shift in perspective changes the way you feel and the way you think. It calms your mind, steadies your emotions, and reminds you that the situation is only a chapter, not the whole book. Strength comes from knowing that even if you are struggling today, tomorrow holds new possibilities. Even if the path looks dark right now, light is still on its way. Even if everything feels heavy, the weight will eventually lift. When you internalize the truth that situations evolve, you stop panicking when things go wrong. Instead of collapsing under pressure, you remind yourself that the pressure itself will pass. Instead of assuming the worst, you stay open to the fact that change can happen at any moment. A new opportunity, a new insight, a new breakthrough, a new solution. Life has a way of shifting when you least expect it. No storm lasts forever. No winter stays forever. No valley remains unchanged. Strength grows when you ground yourself in the understanding that you are not stuck. You are simply passing through a season that is shaping you for the next one. This perspective also gives you patience, which is a form of strength many people overlook. When you know that every season eventually turns, you stop forcing outcomes that are not ready. You stop rushing your growth. You stop demanding immediate answers. Instead, you learn to endure with wisdom. You give yourself permission to take your time. You allow life to unfold without drowning in fear. A person who believes everything is permanent becomes frantic and desperate. But a person who understands the temporary nature of all things becomes patient, calm, and resilient. They don't break under time or pressure because they know both are always shifting. Recognizing that situations are temporary also helps you detach from emotional extremes. When something good happens, you enjoy it without clinging too tightly. When something painful happens, you feel it without assuming it will always be that way. Emotional balance is born from the awareness that everything moves. Strength is not pretending that life is easy. Strength is knowing that no matter how difficult it becomes, the difficulty itself is not eternal. This gives you the courage to face discomfort, the ability to stay grounded in uncertainty, and the confidence to keep moving forward even when progress feels invisible. Another powerful part of embracing impermanence is the way it transforms your relationship with fear. Most fear is rooted in the belief that a negative outcome will define your life forever. People fear failure because they think it will permanently damage their future. They fear heartbreak because they assume they will never be whole again. They fear disappointment because they believe it will crush their spirit permanently. But when you understand that everything evolves, fear loses its grip. You realize that pain heals, failure teaches, heartbreak softens, and disappointment redirects. You no longer avoid challenges out of fear of getting stuck, because you know that life will keep moving, and so will you. This awareness also makes you stronger during personal transformation. You stop resisting change and instead begin flowing with it. You understand that every version of you is temporary: the fearful you, the confident you, the wounded you, the growing you, the evolving you, and because of that, you give yourself permission to transform. You welcome growth instead of fighting it. You release old identities instead of clinging to them. You adapt more easily to new realities because you know that nothing in life remains fixed. Strength is adaptability. And adaptability comes from understanding that life is a constant movement of endings and beginnings. Finally, knowing that every situation is temporary gives you hope. And hope is one of the strongest forces a person can carry. Hope is what keeps you standing when everything around you feels uncertain. Hope is what reminds you that better days exist even if you can't see them yet. Hope is what helps you breathe through the pain, walk through the confusion, and stay focused on the future instead of drowning in the present moment. When you live with the deep awareness that nothing stays the same forever, you hold on to hope in a way that keeps you grounded, resilient, and unbreakable even in the most difficult moments.